How smoking went from sacred ritual to all-day habit. Right now, somewhere near you, someone is lighting a cigarette. They'll do it again in about an hour. And again after that. By the end of the day, they won't even remember most of the times they did it. There are over 1 billion smokers on Earth today. But here's what almost nobody knows. For the first 11,800 years that humans used this plant, nobody smoked it like that. Not once a day, not as a habit, not just to get through a Tuesday. What we think of as smoking, the daily ritual, the pack-a-day routine, the all-day high, is not ancient. It's barely 150 years old. In the story of how we got from sacred fireside ceremony to a cigarette every single hour reveals something strange about addiction, about industry, and about what your brain actually wants from that smoke. So when did humans first light something on fire just to breathe it in? And how did that turn into something people do 30, 40 times a day without even thinking? Let's start at the very beginning. Because the beginning is much, much older than you guess. In 2021, archaeologist Darren Duke and his team published a discovery in the journal Nature Human Behavior that rewrote the timeline completely. At a site called Wishbone, in the Great Salt Lake Desert of Utah, they found 4 charred tobacco seeds inside an ancient fireplace. The seeds were 12,300 years old. Before this find, the oldest known evidence of tobacco use was a smoking pipe from Alabama, dated to about 3,300 years ago. This pushed the timeline back by 9,000 years in a single discovery. These weren't farmers. They were Ice Age hunter-gatherers, some of the very first humans to ever set foot in the Americas. And they were already using a wild, undomesticated tobacco plant called Nicotiana attenuata, not for food, but, researchers believe, for its intoxicating effect. Duke put it simply, tobacco may be the king of intoxicant plants. And it found us almost the moment we arrived on a new continent. But here's what's fascinating. This wasn't a one-time accident. Across thousands of years and thousands of miles, the pattern repeats. Ancestral Puebloans in what's now Arizona were chewing tobacco 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. Indigenous communities across North and South America used tobacco in ceremonies, in medicine, in trade, for thousands of years before any European ever saw it. And here's the part that breaks the modern picture completely. None of this was daily, casual, or constant. So let's talk about how tobacco was actually used, because it looked nothing like a cigarette break. Tobacco was smoked in pipes during ceremonies. It was offered to spirits. It was smudged, burned as a kind of incense, not inhaled at all. It was chewed during long hunts or sacred rituals, not lit up between errands. For most of human history, tobacco was occasional, ceremonial. Sometimes even reserved for specific people, specific moments, specific seasons. For a long time, historians assumed indigenous tobacco use looked like modern smoking, just smaller in scale. But that assumption was wrong. Researchers have found that tobacco is just as often eaten, drunk, or rubbed on the skin as it was smoked. The lighted constantly version of tobacco use that we now think of as normal, that's not the ancient pattern at all. That's something else entirely. What ancient tobacco use actually represented was a deliberate, altered state, entered into on purpose, for a reason, and then left behind. Not a background habit running in the back of your day, a doorway you walk through and walk back out of. So, what changed? The answer isn't culture, it's machinery. And here's the part nobody talks about. By the mid-1500s, the French diplomat Jean Nicot was introducing it to European royalty. His name is where the word nicotine comes from. Within a century, tobacco had become a global commodity, grown on plantations across the colonies. But people still mostly smoked it in pipes, or as cigars, or chewed it. Slow, expensive, hand-rolled. As late as the year 1900, only about 2% of tobacco users in America smoked cigarettes at all. Chewing tobacco was still the most common form. Then, one machine changed everything. In 1880, an American inventor named James Bonsack patented a machine that could roll cigarettes automatically. A skilled human roller could make about 3,000 cigarettes a day. The Bonsack machine could make 120,000 in the same time. Suddenly, tobacco wasn't a slow ceremony or an expensive luxury. It was cheap. It was fast. It was everywhere. By 1952, cigarettes had gone from 2% of tobacco use to 81%. In just over 50 years, the entire way humans use this plant had flipped upside down. But a machine alone doesn't create a habit. Something else had to happen to your brain. Cigarettes deliver nicotine to the brain in about 10 seconds, faster than injecting a drug directly into a vein. Each hit is small, quick, then it fades, and the brain quietly asks for another one. That's the design that turned an occasional ceremony into something people now do every single hour of their waking life. The ancient version of tobacco use was built around intensity, a strong, occasional, meaningful experience. The modern cigarette is built around the opposite, a small dose repeated constantly, so the brain never fully resets. That's not a ritual anymore. That's a loop. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a 12,000-year-old ceremonial pipe and a $7 pack from a gas station. It just knows nicotine showed up, and it wants it to show up again, faster this time. And this is where the all-day high was actually born. World War I and World War II accelerated it even further. Cigarettes were handed out in military ration kits. By 1920, more than half the tobacco consumed in Britain was in cigarette form. By 1941, the U.S. South passed the same mark. An entire generation of soldiers came home with a habit built directly into their daily schedule. Not a ceremony anymore, but a rhythm. We didn't just speed up how tobacco was used. We re-engineered the human relationship with it. From something you stepped into occasionally to something running quietly in the background of your entire day. So what do we do with that now? What if the urge to light up isn't really about tobacco at all? What if it's the ghost of something much older? The human need for a deliberate pause, a small ritual, a moment stepped outside of normal time. Except now it fires every 20 minutes instead of a few times a year. Maybe that's why quitting feels like losing more than a chemical. It feels like losing a ritual, even a broken one. Because some far older part of the brain still remembers when this fire meant something. Right now, somewhere near you, someone is lighting a cigarette. They have no idea they're holding the faint, mechanized echo of something that once took a hunter-gatherer halfway across a continent and 12,000 years to find. So here's the question worth sitting with. How many other habits in your daily life are actually just ancient rituals running on fast forward, stripped of their original meaning? Drop your guess in the comments. I read every one of them. And if this kind of deep dive into the hidden history behind everyday things is your thing, subscribe, because next week I'm tracing the surprisingly recent and surprisingly strange history of why humans drink coffee first thing in the morning. You will not see that one coming.